Now, told you about 10 tips, and I'm already at tip number 6. That is about strong convincing power. I'm not sure I'm doing a good job at convincing you. I don't know if I have a strong convincing power, but we've seen on the field public-private dialogue with different level of convincing power. And the way they do that is they use advertising technique. You know, no shame. Let's convince people what we do is right. And they learn from the best, which is people trying to sell you stuff based on an image we have of things rather than what people think, what things are sometimes. And so they use advertising campaign, outreach campaigns, because it's an inverse thing than advertising sometimes. They need to actually make people understand what things are. You know, when you sell Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola or any other type of cola you have in your country, people know what a cola is. And so the advertising campaign is all about the values that you have for this thing. Often on public-private dialogue, you need to actually go back to what is the product. What is the reform you're trying to push for? People need to understand what is this public-private dialogue that's happening and how does that represent me? And so explaining that in simple terms is very important. On the left here, you have a brochure that was done with even comic books at the beginning, at the bottom, to explain the people the process. You have sometimes techniques like press conference with a symbolic events, as people signing, people in front of a building doing something symbolic. People using some campaigns like with a slogan, you know, what kills corruption? Honesty. Sometimes branding in an initiative where the name's going to be like Better Business Initiative, you know, it sounds much better than the greater partnerships to improve the regulatory environment for small, medium enterprises. Better Business Initiative sounds better. People can understand what it is right away. Sometimes it's about using means like the newspaper, the magazines, the radio, and even TV shows. In Cambodia, we had TV shows, you know, talking about all those things, SME development through the public-private dialogue and all this. Sometimes it's name and shame, accountability. You know, you want to put in the newspaper, those people said they were going to do these reforms and they didn't do these reforms. And the public-private dialogue can have a watchdog function as well. You use websites, of course. The web is very important nowadays, the social media, and these are the way to do it. Make people accountable and inform people. And so here on the Bangladesh Better Business Forum, public-private dialogue, which has been renamed since then, on their website they used to have actually a thermometer of reform, you know, like how many have been implemented, how many have been proposed, how many have been approved, how many are pending, and then all the information you can find about it, all the different partners that are on the Vietnam Business Forum, you know, who is there, what are the issues, people can download the information. This is a way to communicate as well with people. Communicating, you know, needs to be done with very strong planning, and you need to plan the entire span of the next 6 months of your public-private dialogue in a very careful way. When are we going to go out to the press to say what? When are we going to do working groups meeting? When are we going to do plenary meetings? Because the private sector, they don't want to waste their time. They need to know what's involved in me participating to a public-private dialogue like this. How much time am I going to use? You know, what resource do I need to dedicate to that? And on the government time, you know, the government side, they need time to plan ahead, to bring people in. We need to know what resources are involved. So planning is very important. And so you do action planning. So we developed templates for action plans that people can use. People can do different type of action plans. Anything works, but you need to have some kind of action plans. This is what we want to do for those kind of issues. You know, when we're going to monitor our results, this is when we're going to do it. This is how we're going to do it. This is the systems we're going to set up. We have to reach out to a number of champions to make sure they can address, you know, those people to solve an issue, and we're going to bring them in at a certain time. You need to plan all that stuff. It's like doing a business, you know. Don't become successful overnight. You got to plan for it. The same thing with a public-private dialogue. It's like a small business in a way. You got to run it, to manage it. and to budget for it, of course. Now, budget, we said, it's not that expensive in the grand scheme of things. Costs roughly between 100, 200K, 300K a year. I'm talking in US dollar, but there is such a range. You will find public-private dialogue that costs nothing because the people are there and they are doing the thing. You will find some that cost millions and millions of dollars because they set up huge institutions. So there is a big range, but whatever the range is, you need to understand what is the cost of the dialogue. And the cost doesn't just mean what money a public-private dialogue secretariat might get and manage, but what's the cost of people getting involved? What the cost of the private sector presence? And you can actually calculate that. You can say, what is the rate, the consulting rate for this kind of level of people in the private sector? You can take it in the country as a benchmark, and you can say, well, that many hours of people coming to meeting and talking and devising solution. And you can take that amount and you can say, this is the in-kind contribution from the private sector. You will often find that the in-kind contribution from the private sector vastly exceeds the amount of money that the Secretariat has to actually manage the dialogue process. Same thing on the public sector side. You got to calculate all those costs, because how can you run a business without knowing, the budget? Same thing with the dialogue process, especially that you need to be accountable. You need to be able to say, this is the amount that it costed to do it, and this are the reforms, that the actions. This is the result in terms of economic development, the result in terms of jobs, the result in terms of service delivery, whether in the health sector or in the education sector, the amount of graduates we helped create through this dialogue, and correlate those two things. The monitoring evaluation process, of course, that's what it's all about, measuring the results so you can adapt. And here you can use tools. Or you can use your own tools. We've developed some kind of a benchmark that we try to use by looking at not so much the quantity of each of those 12 points we mentioned before as to what you do, but more the quality of those, And you're welcome to look on the publicprivatedialogue.org. We have a full methodology to devise your own evaluation wheel where you can go through the structure and participation, mandate and institutional alignments. And the questions there are not like, are you structured in a simple way or in a complicated way? No, they're like, do you have a structure you've agreed on? Is it documented or not? Do people know what they have to do? Do you have terms of reference? So it's more in terms of the setup of things as opposed to what things are. And this is what this evaluation will measure, but we also measure the reform process and other things. So there are a variety of tools you can use, and at the World Bank Group, we like to use similar tools to try to compare things, but you got to find things that match the environment where you are. And if there are tools that are being used in terms of public sector performance or private sector performance that you can use among the actors, use those tools by all means. But use something so you can report. That's very important.